The notification came at 6:47 in the morning. Not a call. Not a knock. A notification. I was still in my robe, standing at my kitchen counter with a mug of coffee that hadn't cooled enough to drink yet, when my phone lit up with an alert from my bank. Account activity detected. I almost dismissed it. I almost set the phone face down and went back to watching the rain streak down the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment. But something made me look. Pending wire transfer. $38,000. Initiated from a branch in Columbus, Ohio. I had not been to Columbus, Ohio in 4 years. I had not initiated any wire transfer, and I had not given anyone permission to touch that account. Before you hear what happened next, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I want to see how far this story reaches. I didn't panic. I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed structural engineer. I've spent the last decade learning that panic is a luxury you cannot afford when load-bearing decisions need to be made. I set down my coffee, I sat down at my desk, and I pulled up everything. The wire had not cleared yet. It was pending. That meant I had a window. I called the bank. I reported it as unauthorized. I had the transfer flagged and suspended within 11 minutes. The representative on the phone told me I should also check whether any new accounts had been opened in my name recently, and that's when the second alert appeared on my screen. Personal loan application. $90,000. Submitted 3 days prior. Approved. Disbursed. To an address in Columbus, Ohio. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grip the edge of my desk. The loan had already gone through. $90,000. Borrowed in my name. With my social security number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name, and a copy of my driver's license that I had not provided to anyone. The repayment was scheduled to come out of my primary checking account starting in 30 days. I was already on the hook. I knew exactly one person with access to every piece of that information. I knew exactly one person who had my childhood documents, my old ID scans, and the answer to every security question my family had ever set up on shared accounts when I was 17. I knew exactly one person who lived in Columbus, Ohio. My brother. His name is Derek, and for as long as I can remember, he has been the son our family orbited. He is 3 years older than me, charming in the specific way that makes strangers trust him immediately, and people who love him pay for it later. Growing up, I was the quiet one. The one who studied. The one who stayed in her lane and did not demand attention because attention in our house was a finite resource, and Derek had already claimed all of it. My parents used to joke that Derek got the personality and I got the brains. They said it like it was a compliment to both of us. It took me until my mid-20s to understand it was actually an apology for the fact that they had already decided which one of us mattered more. Derek went through phases the way other people go through seasons. He was going to be a real estate developer, then a tech entrepreneur, then a day trader. Each time he needed seed money, my parents provided it. Each time the venture collapsed, they absorbed the loss without public comment and waited for the next idea. I watched my mother wire him money for a food truck he sold after 6 months. I watched my father co-sign a loan for a fitness studio that closed before the grand opening banner came down. I never said anything. I was just the background noise. The hum of the refrigerator. Present, functional, invisible. I left Ohio at 22 with a full scholarship in a single suitcase. I paid my own way through graduate school. I took a job with a structural engineering firm in Seattle, put in the kind of hours that made my hands shake on Friday nights, and built a reputation that eventually let me go independent. By the time I was 29, I had my own consulting practice. By 30, I had a waiting list. By 31, I had a downtown apartment, a growing investment portfolio, and the specific quiet satisfaction of a person who built something from nothing with no help from anyone. My family knew I was doing well. They did not know how well. I had learned a long time ago that visibility in my family was a liability. The moment you showed value, someone tried to extract it. I should have known the extraction was already underway. I spent that entire day on the phone. The bank. The fraud department. A consumer protection attorney named Vivian, who a colleague had recommended once, and whose number I had saved without ever thinking I would need it. Vivian had a voice like dry concrete. Flat, load-bearing, no softness. She asked me to send her everything I had. I sent her everything. That evening, she called me back. She told me the loan was taken out with a combination of my real documents and a forged signature. She told me the wire transfer I had caught that morning was not the first attempt. There had been 2 smaller test transfers in the weeks prior that I had not noticed because they had been reversed before hitting my main account. Whoever did this had been careful. They had been patient. They had been building up to something larger. She asked me if I had any idea who might have access to my identifying information. I told her about Derek. There was a pause on the line. Then Vivian said, quietly, that before I did anything else I should check one more thing. She told me to pull my full credit report. I pulled it that night. There were 3 accounts I had never opened. A credit card from 8 months ago. A second personal loan from 14 months ago, already in collections. And a retail financing account I had never heard of, tied to a furniture store in Columbus. Derek had not done this once. He had been doing it for over a year. I sat at my desk for a long time after that. The city glowed outside my window, all of it indifferent and beautiful, and I thought about the last time I had seen my brother. Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. He had seemed tired, distracted, the confident, easy charm replaced by something thinner. My mother had whispered to me in the kitchen that he was going through a rough patch. I had nodded and carried the sweet potato casserole to the table, and not asked any questions because, in my family, you did not ask questions about Derek's rough patches. You managed around them. I thought about all the Thanksgivings before that one. All the dinners where my father talked about Derek's latest project while I sat quietly eating. All the birthdays where my achievements were mentioned briefly before the conversation swung back to whatever Derek was planning next. All the times my mother said, "You're so independent, sweetheart," as though independence were a personality trait I had been born with rather than a survival skill I had developed because no one was coming to help me. I did not sleep that night. I spent it compiling every document Vivian had asked for, and a few she had not. The next morning, I called my parents. My mother answered on the second ring. Warm and immediate, the way she always was when she thought the call was going to be pleasant. I told her what I had found. The loan, the credit accounts, the fraudulent documents. I said Derek's name clearly, without softening it, without the hedge I had always placed around anything that might disturb the image they had built of him. The warmth drained out of her voice in real time. "He's struggling," she said. "You know how hard things have been for him. He probably just needed to borrow a little. He would have paid it back. You have so much, and he has so little right now. You could just work something out with the bank and not make this into something it doesn't need to be." I want to be very precise about what my mother said in that sentence. She said, borrow, as though identity theft were borrowing, as though forging a signature and draining someone's creditworthiness were a short-term loan between siblings who trusted each other. I told her I was going to the police. She told me I was being cruel. I asked her if she understood that I had a collections account on my credit report for a loan I never agreed to, that my score had dropped 41 points, that a wire of $38,000 had nearly cleared from my savings that morning. She said Derek was her son and she needed me to remember that family came first. I hung up. My father called back 4 minutes later. He was using the voice he reserved for serious conversations, measured and deliberate, the voice he had used when he sat me down in high school to tell me that college was expensive and I should be realistic about my options. The same week, he had told Derek to dream big and not let anyone limit him. He said he understood I was upset. He said the situation was more complicated than it looked from the outside. He said Derek had made some mistakes, bad investments, some debt he couldn't manage, and that he had come to my parents for help, but they didn't have the resources they once did. He said Derek had felt like he had no choice. I let him finish. Then I asked one question. "Did you know?" The pause before his answer was long enough to tell me everything. He said they had found out a few months ago. He said they had told Derek he needed to come clean. He said they were trying to handle it quietly as a family. For a few months, my father had known that his son had stolen my identity. He had known there was a fraudulent loan in my name going into collections. He had known my credit was being destroyed, and he had said nothing to me. He had been waiting for it to resolve itself, which in my family's vocabulary meant waiting for me to absorb the cost the same way I had absorbed every other cost that Derek left behind. I asked him if Derek had also stolen from anyone else. Another pause. Longer this time. I found out later that there were 2 other people. A college friend, Derek, had burned for $12,000, and a former business partner who was already in the process of filing a civil suit. My parents knew about both. They had been paying Derek's attorney to slow-walk the civil case. The money for the attorney had come from their retirement account, the same account they had been quietly drawing down for years to fund Derek's ventures. To the point where at 64 and 62 years old, my parents had approximately 4 months of living expenses saved. I did not know any of that yet when I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my apartment. What I knew was that I was done being the refrigerator hum. I was done being the background. I was done being the stable, invisible, reliable thing in the corner that everyone counted on and no one considered. I called Vivian and told her to move forward. I want to be honest about what the next 3 weeks felt like. I don't want to narrate it like a highlight reel of vindication because that's not what it was. It was exhausting and slow, and there were nights when I woke up at 2 in the morning with a chest full of something that wasn't quite grief but wasn't far from it. Derek had not just stolen money. He had stolen the years of careful privacy I had built to protect myself from exactly this. He had stripped off the invisibility I had used as armor and turned it into a weapon against me. I also want to be clear about what I did not do. I did not call Derek. I did not warn him. I did not give him the opportunity to craft a story because Derek is very good at stories. Derek is the kind of person who can look you in the eye and make you feel like the villain of his narrative before you have finished your first sentence. I had watched him do it to creditors, to former partners, to the fitness studio landlord who had been so apologetic about needing the 3 months of unpaid rent that he had almost seemed grateful Derek took his time moving out. I was not going to give him a stage. The fraud report went to the Seattle field office of the FBI. Because identity theft that crosses state lines is a federal matter, Vivian filed a civil suit simultaneously. The credit bureaus were notified. The loan was formally disputed with documentation. Then my father called again. This time, he had Derek on the line. I didn't know that at first. I thought it was just my father. He started by saying he wanted to work something out. He said Derek wanted to apologize. He said if I would agree to withdraw the fraud report, Derek had a plan to repay the loan over time, and the family could get through this without anyone going to prison. I said I would think about it. I said I would think about it. I said I would call them back the next day. I did not call them back. What I did instead was forward the call recording. I am in a one-party consent state, and I record all calls with my family, a habit I developed after a disagreement about my grandmother's estate 3 years earlier that I will not get into now, to Vivian, who forwarded it to the FBI investigator assigned to the case. On that recording, my father had referenced specifics about the fraudulent loan that he would only know if Derek had told him about it in detail. Specifically, he mentioned the name of the branch where the loan had been originated and the amount of the second personal loan from 14 months ago, neither of which had been in any news report or public filing. That recording established that my father had prior knowledge and had potentially participated in efforts to obstruct the investigation by pressuring me to withdraw the report. I want to be precise again. I did not set a trap. I did not engineer that call. I had simply stopped making myself small enough to fall into theirs. The moment I knew it was over came on a Tuesday afternoon when Vivian called me and asked me to sit down, which she had never done before in any previous call. The forensic review of Derek's financial records, which the FBI had subpoenaed, had uncovered something that made the identity theft look like a minor footnote. Derek had not just stolen from me and 2 other individuals. Over the past 3 years, he had been operating a small-scale investment scheme, soliciting money from 8 people, mostly acquaintances and former colleagues, under the premise of a real estate development fund that did not exist. He had collected approximately $340,000 total. He had spent it. There was no fund. There was no development. There was a storage unit in Columbus containing some promotional materials and a very nice espresso machine. The identity theft against me had been Derek's attempt to cover the last round of losses before the scheme collapsed entirely. He had needed $90,000 to pay back one of the larger investors who had started asking uncomfortable questions. If the wire transfer had cleared that morning, it would have bought him another few months of silence. Vivian told me the wire fraud and securities fraud charges, stacked with the identity theft counts, were looking at a federal sentencing range of 8 to 12 years. I sat with that for a moment. 8 to 12 years. For my brother, who my mother used to call her heart walking around outside her body. For Derek, who had taught me to ride a bike in the parking lot behind our church when I was 6 years old. Before I understood what it would cost me to love someone who only knew how to take, I am not going to tell you I felt nothing. I am going to tell you that what I felt was not what I expected. It was not satisfaction. It was not the clean, sharp edge of justice that social media trains you to expect when you imagine this moment. It was something heavier and sadder and more honest than that. It was the feeling of finally being seen, not by the people who were supposed to see me, but by a situation that had stripped away every comfortable fiction and left us all exactly as we were. My parents retained a private attorney for Derek using the last of the retirement savings that they hadn't already spent. My mother called me 3 times in the 2 weeks after the charges were filed. The first call was angry. The second was tearful. The third was a voicemail I did not return that lasted 4 minutes and 40 seconds and contained the sentence, "We did everything for you, and this is how you repay us." Which is a sentence that would be almost funny if it didn't also make me want to put my phone in a drawer and leave it there for a year. I want to address something directly, because I know it will come up. Some people will hear this story and say that I should have handled it privately, that I should have given Derek the chance to repay me quietly, that going to the FBI was too far, too hard, too cold. I want you to think carefully about what that argument is actually asking. It is asking me to absorb the cost of my brother's crimes so that my family did not have to face consequences. It is asking me to protect the reputation of a person who spent 14 months systematically stealing my identity, who watched the collections account appear on my credit report and said nothing, who sent a test wire to my savings account to make sure it would work before he tried to empty it. It is asking me to be, once again, the refrigerator hum. The reliable background thing. The one who holds steady so everyone else can keep moving. I am done holding steady for people who were moving in the wrong direction. There was one more thing. This part I did not plan. It happened 3 weeks after the charges were filed, on a Saturday morning when I was at my office working through a set of load calculations for a bridge project. My intercom buzzed. I looked at the security camera feed. My mother was standing outside the building entrance. She was alone. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in the gray coat she had worn since I was in high school, and she was not looking at the camera. She was looking at her shoes. I buzzed her up. She came in and sat down across from my desk and did not look around the way people usually do when they see my office for the first time. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at me directly, and her face was not the face of the woman who had told me Derek was just struggling, just borrowing, just going through a rough patch. It was older than that face. More tired. She said, "I didn't protect you the way I should have." I did not say anything. She said she had known something was wrong for a long time. She said she had told herself that Derek would fix it. She said she had told herself I was strong enough to handle whatever came, as though my capability were a reason to require less care rather than a reason to offer more. She said she was sorry. I believed her. And I want to be clear that believing her did not fix anything. An apology is not a foundation. It is a starting point, and whether anything gets built on it is a question that takes years, not a single Saturday morning in a downtown office. I told her that. I told her I believed she was sorry, and that I needed time and that I was not going to promise her anything right now, because I had spent 31 years making myself predictable and reliable and easy for everyone around me, and I was not prepared to do that anymore. She nodded. She stood up. She put on her coat. At the door she paused and said, "You look like you're doing really well." Like the office, the independence, the life I had built were something she was noticing for the first time. I said I am. She left. I sat at my desk for another hour without touching the load calculations. Then I opened my financial dashboard. My credit score had recovered 22 points since the fraud was formally cleared. The fraudulent accounts had been removed. The $90,000 loan had been vacated by court order. My savings account, the one Derek had almost emptied, was intact. I had started this year as the invisible one, the quiet one, the background hum that everyone counted on without ever thinking about. I had ended it as the person who had documented everything, reported everything, and let the truth do what truth does when you stop helping people bury it. Derek pleaded guilty 6 months later. He received 7 years in federal prison. The 8 investors he had defrauded filed a combined civil judgment against him that will follow him for the rest of his adult life. My father, who had been present on the recorded call, was not charged, but was required to cooperate fully with the investigation and forfeit the funds he had provided for Derek's defense, which were determined to be proceeds connected to the scheme. I am not the golden child. I never was. I was the one they forgot to worry about because I never gave them a reason to. And for a long time, I thought that was a failure. I thought being self-sufficient meant I had somehow done something wrong, chosen the wrong way to love my family, been too quiet, too independent, too much in the background. I know now that it was none of those things. It was just who I was, and a family that had decided only one kind of person was worth celebrating. And when that person failed, they came for the one they had always taken for granted. They forgot that the person doing the quiet work is also the person who knows exactly where everything is buried. If you have ever been the one in the background, the stable one, the one who doesn't make a scene and doesn't ask for much, and just holds things together while everyone else gets the attention, I want you to hear this. Your restraint is not weakness. Your documentation is not cruelty. Your refusal to absorb someone else's crimes to keep the peace is not a betrayal. It is the most basic form of self-respect. You do not owe anyone the silence that protects them from their own choices. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've been through something like this, I want to know. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.